The recording has started. All right, this is it. I hit the button. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Nutmeg Division. Looks like we got a good number of people here. John Hager, I see you. Jim, I see you. John Peters, welcome. John Gam, how's it going?
Hello.
Ron, well, it looks like Ron stepped away. Stephen Meyer, good seeing you. And here's Andrew. Oh, what a kitty! Look at that. Beautiful cat. Tom Morrison, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen.
Trying to mute
Get rocking. What was that, John? Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so this is a division meeting. It's been way too long, folks. Glad everyone's able to make it. Let's see. So, a couple of quick announcements. As far as I know, the regional convention for 2020 up in what is it? Westford, Mass. This October is still on. Registration is now available. You can visit millcity2020.org. Sign up is there. I think the attendee to do the convention is $55, and then there's a combo deal where you can do the banquet, the dinner, and the breakfast for I think like $110. It's actually pretty well worth it, and the banquets are a lot of fun. I was usually not a banquet attendee, but last year I went to my first one, and it was actually a lot of fun. So, yeah, visit millcity2020.org, and if you're interested to register and find out more information, they published a clinic list too, so I will be presenting along with Eric Whitney as part of our DCC University, basically programming with JMRI. All right, a couple other changes at the division. We now have a YouTube channel. Yay! Thank you to Andrew for taking the time to set it up. So this meeting will actually be recorded and will probably be our first content on the channel. The idea here is to kind of put recordings of the meetings, different presentations or clinics if people want to do something remote but can't attend to the actual meeting, or even do like layout tours, kind of similar to what Gordy has done with NMRAX, but it will be more division centric. So with that being said, I need ideas. It would be awesome if we could get some ideas for contents on the channel. The other thing, too, is now we actually, as evidence the fact that we're here, we have a virtual meeting space. Freeconferencecall.com is going to be our platform going forward. With this, we actually have the ability to have presenters come from not just within our division, but anywhere around the world. And then also, too, one thing that I would like to kind of do is maybe do like something more consistent, like the virtual hangout space for some people who are on the farther reaches of our division who may not necessarily be able to attend but would like to in person, but still would like to participate. The other thing, too, is we can also bring this into our meeting, possibly. We would have to check the requirements of our meeting space at the police station, but I believe if we can get some internet access, we can even have a virtual session running concurrent to our main meeting. So again, members on the fringes of our division could participate in our bi-monthly meetings as well. So with that said, a couple of new volunteering opportunities coming up at Nutmeg Division. I'm looking for people to kind of help me. And this position is actually multiple positions. I'm looking for an organization where we have a team lead and team members, people who can help with our social media platforms, which is Facebook and YouTube. just basically updating it and whatnot. And then the team lead would coordinate, would basically organize this team and then coordinate with the different platforms, as well as maybe help me set up or host these virtual conferencing or virtual meetings.
Keely, she's our superintendent right now.
You put your camera on?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting out of the way.
Okay.
Camera.
Sorry, was there a question? Okay.
I'd like to make a recommendation. If you're not presenting or otherwise having a conversation, could you please mute your microphone?
So the next thing is clinic, looking also for clinic coordinator. Currently, Jim is having this position. Jim has done a wonderful job in the last few years and brought us many amazing presenters, including the one we have today. Yeah, so the goal of the role of the clinics coordinator is to locate and identify potential clinicians or clinic topics for our division meetings, and then work with our leadership team for like dates, the schedule, when we can schedule the person, announcements, format of the presentation, whether it's going to be done in person or if it's going to be done virtual. Jim, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to what I've written up here.
No, you've covered it fairly well. It's I will say this: trying to get clinicians is a very, very big task.
Oops.
Can you hear me?
Sorry, I hit the sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Okay, because I kept on hearing muted.
We're playing the conference called Bingo right now.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, with the I'm going to get the bingo card out and start playing with the talking over somebody. How do you mute? Random shit in the background, stuff like that.
Okay, so anyway, it's a challenge to find clinicians. It really, really is, and it's gotten even more difficult now that we have this situation here with the virus. You know, people are all cloistered up. They really don't want to, you know, do anything. I'm very thankful that Tom was willing to come in today and give us a clinic on Frank Sprague and the whole deal with trolleys. But anyway, someone who has a lot of contacts in the model railroad community, certainly more so than myself. And the trick is to get people to come on in and give a presentation. Most people are afraid of public speaking, so that becomes an issue too. So anyway, that's all I have to say about it.
Right. Yeah, and also too, it's not necessarily always having known people. If you can also if you hear a good clinic or see a good clinic from like an MRAX or some other convention, you may have to, because of our virtual abilities now, we can also have host them virtually, present virtually, so it doesn't have to necessarily be in person as well. So that's the beauty of having this platform. But Jim, sorry to see you wanting to step down, but thank you very much for your for all your efforts and everything you've done for the division. I greatly appreciate it. Unfortunately, this is the one drawback of being virtual. I do have a little certificate of appreciation that I would like to give to you, but I'll have to get it in the mail for you.
Well, you can send a PDF.
Yeah, there you go. Well, check's in the mail. Let's put it that way.
There you go. That more than fine. Thank you.
Okay. So the last thing is the board of directors. So my term has technically run out. We were supposed to elect something in April, but unfortunately, due to our current health situation, public health situation, we weren't able to vote. I'm going to put off voting till our next meeting, which is going to be in August. So my position is terming out. I'm more than willing to continue again, but also I want to throw it out there to see if there's anybody else who wants to run for the board of director position. Basically, the board of director is like the main leadership body of our division. The idea is to kind of work and help the division grow, whether it be collecting and soliciting feedback from the memberships for different opportunities for improvement. And then also too working with the rest of the other two boards, John Gam and Jeff Henke, to kind of implement those suggestions and feedbacks and help move the division. So basically, this is a good opportunity for anyone who's coming on board to help drive how the division acts and how the division what does the division do. There is a bi-monthly board of directors meeting, usually after the main meeting. We typically meet right afterwards, which it's open to anybody, so anybody could hop in. For today, we're actually not going to have it. I'm going to actually host it as a separate session because there's some other things that I want to talk about, or a couple other things that are still in the works that I need to finish iron out. But the other one is the other big thing, and the last thing, is kind of help facilitate outreach to the model railroad communities to spread what we're about. And bring people aboard this bus, because the bigger the bus, the more fun it's going to be, right? Okay, that's all I have for terms of announcements. Does anybody else have anything that they want to announce?
When we do these virtual sessions like this, one of the things that we don't have is the white elephant table and the your latest project, whether it be weathering a boxcar or what have you, that we had physically at the train station, or at the police station. Would there be any consideration or enthusiasm for doing something like that online, where you block off 5 or 10 minutes during the business portion and let people take their video camera and highlight their latest efforts?
Good question, Jim, and actually that's a great segue, because I was going to turn into that next. See what people have been working on, because I'm fascinated to see what has been done, or what people have done, either what models they've worked on, what portions of the layout they'd be finished. Yeah, and I think that's a great idea, Jim. Unfortunately, I'm not home. I'm home right now, so I can't share my stuff. I'm actually at my aunt's place because they had no water yesterday, so it's helping them fix that. But yeah, if people are willing to show any of their latest projects, or what's currently on their workbench, I think this is a great opportunity, and it's a great idea to do so.
I've got a question about how easy or not it might be to actually implement a little video segment like that. Is it easy to hook up? Can somebody just grab their cell phone, put it on video, and wave it around for 5 minutes and show everybody what's going on, or is it more complicated?
Should be pretty simple. I mean, it's the same link you use to get into this conference. You can click on your phone and then connect via your phone and then do the same thing.
Oh, okay. Like when we logged in just a short time ago. Just
right.
Hook up the phone that way.
Exactly.
Okay. That almost sounds too simple. I'm surprised.
I know, right? Something's got to go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, Most laptops have an integrated camera, just like you see here, but you also have something like this that's available. This is this old, an old Logitech, that you could use to scan a little module that you have or something like that with the video.
Okay. Yeah, I think there shouldn't be too much reluctance on people's part to participate in that kind of a fashion. Just that they don't want to do a lot of preparation and have to push all the buttons and Jim, to get back to your reluctance to do clinics, a lot of people just don't want to put in the work to do a clinic. I mean, if they just want to try to wing it, I mean, that's one thing, but, winging it doesn't necessarily make the best clinic. And if you sit down and do some preparation, it takes time. And a lot of people just, rightfully or not, they just don't want to put in any time to do anything. And that's part of the problem.
Right. Well, it is scary stuff to think about when you think about it as going up and kind of just presenting and talking, right? It is intimidating, and I know even as much as I do it now, there's still times where I kind of get a little nervous and going up, and it's like, but if you just think of it as talking to a bunch of your friends, right? Forget about it being a presentation. Forget about it being a clinic. If you just think about it as if you're talking to your buddies and showing them what you were doing, it becomes much easier, and you're able to kind of relax a little more. So, yeah, good things, good point, Stephen. So actually, this is actually a good way, I think, to kind of help people relax a little bit and not have it in the formal setting. Just kind of show what's going on with the project, and who knows, maybe that's enough to inspire someone either to make a presentation or say, you know what, I can do this. Maybe I can take this a little bit further. Instead of using 5 minutes, let's do it for half an hour.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I did my very first clinic just a few years ago, I guess, and the first one I did was at the Wethersfield Meet, and that was a great way to work into it because, there's only 20 or 30 people there, and most of them, and it's a great way to get your feet wet. And based on what I learned that time, then the next one was RPM and pharma. And so if people think of it that way, it works out pretty good.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with you, Steven. So yeah, we don't have to do it right this meeting, but I think this is something we should work on, target for the next meeting. If we do it virtually, and even if we don't do it virtually, this is something I would like to do in person as well, if we ever get back to that. In person, what's that? We're basically bringing a simple model or whatever latest project, if it's possible, to show off and kind of showcase what you've been working on.
If somebody would like me to, I've just downloaded the app on my phone, and I can run down and show you my module that I'm building. Right now, if you want.
Let's do it.
All right, hold on a second.
Okay. So while Andrew's connecting, and so we can see your layout, is there any other announcements we want to make?
Hey, Kaylee.
Hey, Ron.
Can you lower your camera a little so we can see your face? Oh, wow, okay. We were seeing basically from your nose up.
Oh.
Okay. Can everybody see me?
Yes. Okay, we see you.
All right. All right, so this is Plainsville, USA. Am I looking at me or looking at the little module?
Well, you're currently
looking
frozen,
at me, aren't you?
But yeah, we're looking at you.
Okay. So now are you looking at a module?
No.
Hold on.
There it is.
Yeah.
I think I hear my. Oh.
Just for a second.
Yeah. So ignore my computer. I think my wife might be talking in the other. Yes, she is. Hold on.
Yeah, can you go
Sorry.
back?
I forgot to mute. You're talking. Turns out the kill switch on my mic on my laptop is not a actual mute switch. Still picking up audio. Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So.
I need everything.
Yeah.
So if you can see, this is Plainsville, USA. It's a work in progress. In fact, I'm going to be in quite a panic here as soon as the meeting's over because I will be. This has a due date of July 1st for the Walters Model Railroad build-off thing that they did. So my wife and I entered a competition to build a grain elevator scene.
Oh, interesting. And can you elaborate a little more on the competition?
Yeah, so basically there was a display set up at the Amherst show over in the Better Living Center by Walters, and basically they were signing people up, you could sign up online, and they sent you some kits to build a grain elevator scene, or a number of different versions. There was a grain elevator, there was a city scene, there was just a couple different things that you could go and do. And I chose grain elevators because I'd done it before, so I figured that would be the easiest thing to figure out for me. And so here I am. This is 3 months in the making. I'm quite a procrastinator. But this is a module that's built to Fremo standards. So the end plate here is 26 inches or 24 inches wide for a single track module, and it's 6 inches deep, 3/4 inch plywood on the end, half on the side. And my wife built this back here, and she's working on another one of these. So we'll have this done. Hopefully by the end of the weekend, because there's the contest is kind of the registration or the entry submission is due on July 1st. So yeah.
Okay. So the idea to take photos of it and then submit it.
Yep. So if you take photos of the finished product, they need one showing the width and the length of the module, and then you get then one top-down view, and then one from each direction. There's like 4 photos you take, and you submit it on their website or their Instagram page, and you're all set. So we'll see how that goes. I'm using Fremo end tie plates. I don't know if you guys can see that or not.
Yep, I can see it.
Yeah, so we're using the
printed circuit board?
Yep, it's printed circuit board. It's those little copper tabs, and that is what I'm doing. You can see Elk Creek Logging Company's torn down, sitting over there on its side, storage, and that was my layout in my apartment in Mystic that I haven't completely taken apart yet. So my garage is a model railroad. All right, I'm gonna switch back to the other computer, so we can get on with our thing here.
Thanks, Andrew.
Cool. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. I look forward to.
Thanks for doing that, Andrew.
Alrighty. Here. Okay. All right, so we'll go into our next portion. So clinics. So we got Tom Lawrenson presenting today talking about Frank Sprague, and then we have Jim. I believe you're doing operations with Jim, or I don't think we.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. From a first startup, never did it before in terms of JMRI, that sort of thing. So it's going to be a very, very elementary look at what you need to do to get set up in JMRI to do operations. So are you going to transfer over presentation mode to Tom?
Yep, I am going to do that right now. So.
Okay, so while you're doing that, little bio of Tom here. Tom is a Scottish educator who has lived in the USA since 2001. Before coming to Connecticut, Tom lived in both downstate and upstate New York and Whidbey Island near Seattle. Since joining Branford Shoreline Trolley Museum, Tom started a speakers bureau, enabling the museum to reach out to groups such as ours, the NMRA, and is a trustee for the museum. Apart from his interest in the museum, Tom is a golfer. After all, he is Scottish. He's the incoming president of the Branford Rotary Club and an amateur extra radio operator. So that's Tom Anderson. Tom, once Kaylee gets you set up, it's all yours.
Okay, well, good morning, and thanks for inviting me to be a clinician. I've never been a clinician before. I'm hoping that at this point you're seeing the Shoreline Trolley Museum logo.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. Well, you'll also see that this is our 75th anniversary as a museum. We were set up in 1945, in the middle of August 1945, but didn't start operations until 2 years later, because the trolley line didn't close until 2 years later in 1947. And so my aim this morning is to shed light on three little things. There they are. First of all, Frank Who, because most people haven't heard of him. I'll spend a brief moment showing you where the trolley lines were in Wethersfield, and then talk a little about the restoration work that goes on at the museum. We have somewhat bigger items to deal with than you do, but I think you might find it interesting. So first of all, Frank Sprague. This is our visitor centre. This is the tiny bit of the museum that's actually in East Haven. The rest is in Branford. And we've named it after Frank Sprague because he really was the father of the trolley system. This is where he was born. This is Milford, Connecticut. In the foreground there is the Jefferson Bridge, and here on the left is the town hall. The building he was born in has gone. These days, from the same place, more or less, you can't see because of these trees, but even if you cross behind the trees, it's all gone. There's a school and government buildings and all sorts of things there now. But oddly enough, when the trolley lines came to Milford, they passed over this very bridge within sight of where Frank Sprague had been born. He was born in 1857, and in 1878, after excelling at school in mathematics, he went to join the army. Yes, I know it says joined the US Navy. He went to sit the exams for West Point, but when he got there, he discovered that they were actually the exams for Annapolis. So he sat them anyway, did very well, and went to Annapolis, where his genius for mathematics coincided with just about the best training in electrical engineering that was available in the USA at the time. He went off to sea in a couple of ships, in a couple of different ships, but really didn't stay all that long. In 1881, he took some leave and went over to Europe to go to the great exhibitions in Paris and in London to see what was happening in the world of electricity. It was only 10 years before he joined the US Navy that people were still building famous ships such as the Cutty Sark, the fast clipper that brought tea from India back to England. And electricity in ships was still quite a rarity at that time. He overstayed his leave. That's not a good thing to do for a young officer, but when he came back, he had so much material with him from these two exhibitions that he seems to have been forgiven. And then he went to work for Edison. Edison clearly had a high opinion of him. Don't think Sprague had much of an opinion of Edison. This is mainly because Edison, as you probably know, was a try everything under the sun to see if anything works type of person, whereas Sprague was a scientist, was an engineer, was a mathematician. One example of the contrast in the different ways they worked is that Edison was concentrating on lighting, and when given the task of building a lighting system for a town, he would take a huge space and build a little model with resistance wire and batteries, and have somebody going around checking the voltages to see where the best position for the battery would be. So building this would take a day or two, and then it might take 2 or 3 days to go around with a meter and check all the voltages. And Edison retired with a slide rule, took a couple of hours, and came up with the answer. And that really is the difference between the two. This is the kind of motor that Frank Sprague ended up building. He actually built them in Edison's factories because there weren't too many places around that could handle this kind of work. But this was a 15 horsepower engine motor working on 220 volts with 91% efficiency, according to the sales picture here. And this was revolutionary. At the time, factories were powered, they had not long since been powered by water, but now they were being powered by huge steam engines, and great shafts ran through the building with wheels and pulley belts, transferring the power to individual machines. Looks like lathes in the foreground at least. So if the steam engine broke down, the whole factory broke down. And the steam engine was governed to a particular speed, and so the combination of pulleys and belts gave your machine a couple of speed, gave it its particular speed, and you really had no control over that. You couldn't speed it up or slow it down terribly easily. What Frank Sprague enabled factories to do is to build individual machines, power supplies for individual machines or groups of 2 or 3 machines, and that gave them flexibility. You could open up the factory with just one machine or all of them. You didn't rely on a huge steam engine. And of course, steam engines have their problems, not least the thermal mass, the thermal momentum, if you like, which means that although you tamp down the boiler overnight, you don't switch it off. You have to be able to raise steam and get going again the next morning. At about this time, well, this is just before Frank Sprague was born, at about this time, urbanization was expanding cities enormously, and so more and more people needed to travel round about cities. And this was one answer. Until then, and for many years after, horse-drawn vehicles were the way to move people. And it was discovered that if you put your horse-drawn vehicle on rails, 2 horses could pull a much bigger load, and so you could get more people in. And this is number 76, going up and down Broadway from Central Park down to more or less Wall Street. And that's the very same vehicle in our museum. It's the oldest horse car in a museum anywhere in the world. It needs a bit of a restoration, but there it is. One of the problems with it is that there's a significant crack in one of the wheels, and the other is that it's a very old vehicle. It doesn't run too well, so we never pull it around with another trolley. We always push it. If it needs to go anywhere, we have to get a bunch of bodies together and push it. It derails at the slightest excuse. At the time, of course, there are always the doomsayers. You know, this will never work, people will get killed, people will get injured, and all the rest of it. But you get an indication from this picture of the state of the streets. It was cobbled streets. So clearly it was much easier to pull a trolley along rails than to pull it across cobbled streets. We have no indication that the horses ever did bolt on any of these things, though. And at about the time, people were experimenting with trolley systems in Russia, in Germany. The one in Berlin was particularly interesting because it ran with positive as one rail and negative on the other rail, with several hundred volts, which meant that young children, young men, young boys in particular, quickly learned that if you threw a little bit of chain across the tracks, you got a nice little fireworks show. And ladies quickly learned that with their long skirts down to the ground, you did not cross these rails in wet weather. All of these lines, however, were on the flat. They were fairly straight, and they were very short. The Blackpool line still exists, and there still is an electric railway in Brighton. Blackpool one in England has been replaced and rebuilt a number of times, but essentially it's still the same route, just along the waterfront. Blackpool being a major tourist resort in the northwest of England. And this was in New Jersey. This is an early trolley system in New Jersey, and the interesting thing about this is that this tells us where the word trolley comes from. If you look up at the power lines, you'll see up there that they have little trolleys that ran along the top of the power rail with a cable carrying the power down to the car. And this is where the name trolley comes from. It's not because of the vehicle itself, it's because in the USA at least, one of the earliest trolley systems, electric railway systems, involved little trolleys travelling along the power line. It's a term that is confined to the USA. In the rest of the world, they're known as streetcars or trams. And this is another historic vehicle. A man called Alden Young brought the first electric railway into Connecticut, and it was the Derby line. And this was the little locomotive that was built to shuttle freight cars between the docks and some factories further upstream. In the middle of the vehicle, you see this big box through the open door. That houses the motor. That vehicle is in our museum, and again you can see a big box inside. The door is shut, but you can see it in there. That was the electric motor powering this locomotive in 1888. And this emphasizes Frank Sprague's importance. He, at that time, was challenged with the contract to build a passenger railway in Richmond, Virginia. And this is the kind of layout of what he was going to build. And unlike the ones that I mentioned earlier, this was going to be 12 miles of track. This was going to be serving a community's daily needs. This was going to be an essential part of the town's infrastructure rather than an experiment or a novelty. And he managed to do it. He had 90 days to get it going. They did have a horse-drawn system before, a much shorter one than what he proposed, so there were some tracks there, but it wasn't terribly good, and most of it had to be rebuilt. And this is the kind of trolley system he came up with, and you'll see that immediately that the trolley on top has gone, and it's been replaced by a wheel on a pole, and the wheel goes underneath the power cable. That makes it a lot easier to reach and to access. Very simple vehicle here. One truck with two axles underneath, and at each end a controller. And the thing with the swan neck handle, this swan neck handle sticking up at each end, that's the brake. And that had to be wound quite fiercely to slow the vehicle and bring it to a halt. Given that Richmond has hills, clearly these fellows had to work pretty hard. Here, for example, we've got one going downhill, and the conductor at the back end is standing by, ready to work the brake at his end if he has to. And this maybe gives us an idea of the hills involved in Richmond and the state of the roads. So these other horse-drawn roads are having to deal with cobbled streets and potholes and roads of very poor quality. So the trolley was a big step up. This one gives you, well, the roads, I hate to think what it would have been like even to walk along roads like that, never mind negotiate them. And as part of the demonstration of this system, one of the things Frank Sprague was asked to do was to show that there was enough power for all the trolleys together. So he lined them up like this. There are 17 of these trolleys there, and one by one they set off just a few seconds apart to travel along the line to show that his power station could power the entire line. We're told that the worker in the power station was told to sit on the knife switch, the trip switch, to nail it down, to do anything he wanted, but under no circumstances was the trip switch to operate. However, the system managed to survive, the trolleys all ran, and the investors were impressed. So much so that this system spread worldwide. In America, from Toronto to Buenos Aires, in Europe, from Moscow to Malaga, people began to build trolley lines using Sprague's system. That's a lot of money when you think about it. We're not sure how much he made, but it must have been a lot. And here's a comparison of the electric motors. The one that we saw earlier in the locomotive was the size of a washing machine, so it had to sit on the trolley floor, taking up space that might have been taken by paying passengers. And a large chain brought the drive down to the axle. Sprague's motors were much, much smaller, so you could sit them underneath the trolley floor, and he also had developed a system where one end of the motor was attached to the chassis, and the other end kind of floated, so that as the axle went up and down, the motor went up and down and maintained the drive. With a motor on the floor of the vehicle, it was much harder to keep a consistent drive. So this is the historic plaque commemorating the event. 12 miles of track, 40 trolley cars on the system. And it ran until 1949, which is longer than many, but there are many places that never got rid of their trolley systems and have continued to upgrade and modernize them. And this is Frank Sprague, probably around the turn of the century. And the challenges that he met, and the reason why his system was so popular, was that he overcame the challenges of distance, 12 miles as distinct from 1 or 2, the grades that the trolleys had to go up and down. This was something the community relied on every day to get people to work, to get people to play, and it had to make money, and his system did that. So much so that cars like this, again from our museum, were soon electrified. The clues that this is a very old car are, first of all, the open ends, with no protection for the motorman. It was only in the early 1900s that the law was changed so that the motorman got protection from the weather. In summer this might have been okay, but in the middle of winter, standing out there on an open platform, it can't have been much fun. The second clue, even in cars that were subsequently given that protection, is the door here to the passenger compartment, so that in winter that door could be closed to keep them warm. In summer it often stayed open to allow ventilation. And the third clue is the bodywork here. You see the curve at the lower part of the bodywork with a board along the side. If this was a ship, we'd be calling it a rubbing strake, the kind of thing you see on ferries when they bang, that takes the effort when they bang alongside the pier. So the curve and the rubbing strake, this vehicle was meant to share the road with cartwheels, basically. So built in 1892, just about the time that Frank Sprague was building his system, but electrified very soon after to get the benefits of that. And here's a countryside shot. I think this is somewhere north of Hartford, but again, look at the roads. Imagine carts, horse-drawn carts going along there, and then along comes a trolley. I think I know which one I'd prefer to travel in. This one, strangely, seems to have a little chimney on it. Some of them did, presumably a coal-burning stove to keep the passengers warm in the winter. Wood burning, probably have to fill it up too often. Another problem that Frank Sprague tackled was a somewhat bigger problem. Here we've got the Bowery in 1895, and we've got horse-drawn vehicles scattered about the place, lots of people walking. We've also got trolley systems like this one, and you can see what looks like another rail or something down the middle. These were trolleys that were pulled along by an underground cable. This is the San Francisco answer. They did it because of hills, but you put a cable down there and the trolley basically reaches down, grabs that cable and gets pulled along. When you want to stop, you let go and apply a brake. When you want to go, you let go of the brake and grab the cable and you get pulled along. Fine, but there were problems there, not least when you're sharing the roadway with horses. It gets mucky down there. We've got an elevated railway, which is fine, but we've got a steam engine here pulling 4 cars, and that's a problem, because if we want to increase the capacity of this railroad, and pull 6 or 8 cars, we'll need a bigger, heavier steam engine that really maybe can't fit on the elevated railway may not take that weight. The other problem is when you get into the city, how do you get back out? You can't just reverse the whole thing because the people on the locomotive can't see where they're going. You have to turn the thing round in some way or go in the city and come out the other end. So there are difficulties there. Plus, this is the sole braking and propulsive effort at one end of the vehicle. The rest are simply passive. And that's a problem. The other problem is that this is the approach in New York City. It's not a very good picture, but at least we can see the steam from the train up here, and we've got a flagman down at the bottom of the picture because this is before electric signals. And this was the cut along Park Avenue that was the approach to what is now Grand Central Terminal. And that cut went through a tunnel at one point. And a steam train going through once went into the cut, into the tunnel. The signals were obscured by smoke from a previous train, and the train crashed into the one ahead of it, killing a number of people. So the city said, okay, no more steam trains into Grand Central. Instead, we have to go electric. Here's Grand Central at about that time. And we can see Park Avenue and that rather distinctive building up there. We'll see that again in a moment. But here's the problem. All that smoke, tunnels, this had to go electric. And Frank Sprague came up with a very interesting answer, which was multiple control. So you took 6 trolley cars, each with their own motors, and you arranged a control system so that an operator could stand at one end of 6 or 8 or 10 cars and control the whole lot together. And then when you got into the city, he simply walked to the other end, threw the switch, and was able to control them from the other end. This was such a magnificent idea that Chicago took it up straight away. New York was a bit later. He demonstrated this on a piece of track up at Schenectady, just west of Albany in New York. And having demonstrated that it worked, he then uncoupled the carriages so that the only connection was the power cable and the control cable. There was no physical coupling. And he ran 3 cars up and down the line, and the distance between the cars hardly varied. An observer said, you know, a hand's width is as much as they went apart. So the system was pretty good. And essentially, that's what happens today with Metro North. He also was able to apply this to elevators. Elevators at the time were mechanical, they were hydraulic, they were pneumatic, but he developed a system for elevators that was so good that one struggling company bought him out, Otis. Without Frank Sprague, there would be no Otis as we know it today. This is Grand Central as the work progressed, because without the need for ventilation to get the smoke out, you could build a whole new system. You could greatly increase the size of the terminal. And again, there's that distinctive little building there on the east side of Park Avenue as the construction proceeds. And another benefit, of course, the reason why this whole thing was financed, is that being able to roof over that huge area meant that you suddenly now had a whole 64 acres of real estate that you could sell right in the middle of Manhattan. This is one of Frank Sprague's little inventions, and this is typical of what he did. Here's the date up here. The drawings are there, and at the bottom, Frank Sprague and William Wilgus. Wilgus was the other fellow who was involved in the Grand Central project, and it's witnessed. And any invention, any development that Frank Sprague ever did, he made sure he dated it, he signed it, he witnessed it. And if that thing in the drawing looks vaguely familiar, that's because it's still used to this day. There they are holding up the third rail. This is the 92nd Street tunnel as you go into Grand Central. This is the tunnel where that accident occurred with the smoke obscuring the signals. So from 1908, this is still in use. If he was alive today, he'd still be making money from that. But Frank Sprague is no longer with us. This is a diagram, I suppose, of the Hartford trolley system as it once was. And here we've got the line going down to Wethersfield. So I'm just going to take a few shots of Wethersfield. This is as it once was. I think this map is 1868. And the trolley system came down Hartford Road, State Road, Main Street, Garden Street, and although I didn't put it in, it turned right and came to an end. I'm not even sure what this little street is, but down here at the end it turned right. And we can still see vestiges of this. This is an old shot of the trolley crossing that railway line, and this is what it looks like today. The railway line clearly isn't a main line anymore, and the picture was taken from down the line, but the railway line still crosses the road and the two have to deal with each other. The trolley, of course, is long since gone. But this is a Google Earth view looking at Main Street and Garden Street. And the interesting thing is, if we look at the four corners of the road, this corner has a much bigger radius to it. It's a much more gentle sweeping curve, and that's because it was shaped by the trolley line that came down here. It's amazing how often we can still find that. In Brantford, we still have 2 or 3 places where the road pattern and the sidewalk still conform to the curve that was set by the trolley line. And at the other end of Garden Street, again, we've got this sweeping curve taking the trolley down here to its terminus. Other corners of the street are somewhat different. In some cases, we can even follow the poles for the trolley line. Utilities are lazy. When a pole is there, they tend to pull it out and stick another one in exactly the same place. So very often we can find the march of the poles where the trolley line was, even though the trolley line has long since gone. And this is something that interests us these days. Trolley lines used to have tracks, used to have overhead power. New trolley lines don't necessarily do that. This is one in China, in Suzhou. It's been running for a couple of years now, and it follows painted lines in the street. And it has batteries. And this one gets to the end of the line, plugs in, and in 10 minutes it's charged up and ready to do its return journey. And if you want to change the trolley route, all you do is paint some more lines and tell the machine, when you get to this point, switch to that line. So no more digging up the streets, and no more having to put in pole after pole and clutter the place up with overhead cables. They have another trolley system in another city that is even simpler in a way. It's still on rails, but when you think about it, how much power does a trolley ever need? In this case, it needs only enough to get it from one end of its route to the other. But in most cases, all they need is enough power to get from one stop to the next. So the Chinese have come up with a system for doing that. Every time the trolley stops, it reaches up to power, and it charges a capacitance battery, not a chemical battery, the kind of battery we're used to, but essentially a huge capacitor. And you can charge that in 20 seconds. And that gives it enough power to go along the line to the next stop. If there's a hill to climb, it takes a wee bit more time to get the extra power it needs to get up. But what a marvelously simple idea. All you need is the power to get you to the next stop. Let's look at some restoration work of the kind that we do at the museum. And this is one that we're particularly proud of. This one operated up in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and as you can see on the side it says post office, it says mail. And this was in a pretty sorry state when it arrived at our museum, but it took about 10 years to restore it to this kind of condition. So we're pretty proud of this one. And this was led by one man with a team of 2 or 3 others, so it's his pride and joy. And part of the restoration, or part of the planning, was building a little model. So I thought you might like to look at the little model of the mobile post office. This would go up and down the line, picking up the mail, You can see here the little sorting area where the envelopes would be sorted. But most of it, in behind this area, is the mail sacks. And a large area here was devoted to parcels. So boxes of fish, cans of milk, all sorts of things could be carried along by this. And it could pick up the mail at one post office stop and drop off a bag of ready sorted mail at another post office stop. And this is the interior now with the pigeonholes for sorting the mail. So it's come a long way since it first arrived. This is another car that we're very proud of, a special car, and let me give you one or two reasons why it's special. Not just because people like to use it to get married, but let's look at this window. This is not the kind of window you normally expect to find on trolleys. This is a Tiffany glass window. Pretty special. The other thing is that the window line here is lower than most. In other words, these windows are bigger than on most trolleys. And at one end, this is how people get in. There are 3 steps up to the floor, and it's maybe hard to see, but when the door closes, a flap here comes down to cover the space here, so that you can't fall out of it easily. At the other end of the trolley, a simple metal stirrup, basically. 1 step up to the floor level. This is for the passengers, this end is for the operator. And this is the interior. So clearly this is no ordinary trolley. This is fitted with coat hooks, wicker chairs, elegant wicker chairs. We can just see in here what actually is a little button. And when you press the button, oh, sorry, I'm ahead of myself here, it also has little writing tables or meal tables that fold up from the sides. And the little button operates an indicator system here to tell the flunky which button had been pressed. Here's the Tiffany glass on the inside because this is the toilet, and this is the door of the kitchen. So these folks travelled in style. The operator, by the way, is confined to a little cubicle in the corner here. This is smaller than the average phone box, so he didn't have much space in there, but his passengers certainly travelled in style. This was used by the directors of the Connecticut company to inspect the system, and it was regularly rented out to other trolley companies for their directors to tour the system, or it was used to show off the system to visitors, you know, rich potential investors, visiting politicians, that kind of thing. This is the little kitchen inside it. And this is a unique trolley that we have. It was built in 1904. It's called the Mineola. If you follow horse racing, you're probably familiar with the name Belmont. The Belmont racetrack over in New York, the Belmont Stakes, which I think were run just the other week. This was the private trolley car of August Belmont, who owned a couple of subway systems in New York and decided he needed his own trolley. In this, he could travel anywhere on the trolley system, but he could also switch over to the main line, hitch onto the back of a train and go to Chicago if he wanted, or San Francisco. This was a luxury car, and you can see at the front here full-length windows so that you could see where you were going. And again, a pretty low level here. The windows were bigger than in most other trolleys to give you a better view. This was used pretty regularly up until 1919. All sorts of dignitaries and wealthy people travelled in it, but it then fell into disuse, was abandoned, was used as a garden shed for a number of years. All the metal underneath, all the trucks and so on, the motors were removed so that only the wooden bodywork remained, and it was used as a garden shed, but eventually it came to our museum. And amazingly, most of the glasswork survived. You can see there was some damage in the roof, some leakage into the main part of the floor there, but we still have this little cubicle for the operator, front right. And I draw your attention to this little bit above the window. We'll come back to that in a moment. This was the interior. This is August Belmont's writing desk, and we get a better view of that strange-looking thing. This is an area where roll-up maps were stored, and so you could pull down and see a map of the area, or a map of the railway, or maybe a map of his investments, I don't know. But it was a display feature. So this was the interior. We've been slow to work on this car, partly because it is very difficult to replace some of the timbers. A lot of it is Philippine mahogany, and that's difficult to get. And the craftsmanship is such that we hesitate to just let anybody loose on it. But we are working on it. Again, we can see the little cubicle for the operator and the full-length front window to allow people to see where they're going. This is the opposite end from the end you've just been seeing. We've restored it a bit, got some curtains up, a bit of carpet in, tidied up the woodwork a bit. The chairs, okay, the chairs don't quite fit, but at least it reminds us that this was the sitting area, the sitting end, if you like, of the trolley. And again, we're seeing this Tiffany glass, this high-quality glass work, and the very fine craftsmanship throughout this car. This is the writing desk, and this was during a restoration phase where the map holder was removed. But now it's back in place. I don't think the roll top part of the desk works, but all the little drawers work. So we're getting there with this car. We're beginning to get it back to something resembling its original state. And this is its little kitchen. Of course, if you travel in style like that, you need a little kitchen. The hot plates and the boiler there worked off 600 volts trolley power. And the restoration, well, oddly enough, the fellow who's restoring it started with the wine rack. I wonder why. But he did. And this is the toilet. We're told it was sand operated. Apparently it flushed with water down into a sand tray that was then removed. So clearly, although we have restored it, we haven't restored it to function. The strange thing about this is that there's just ordinary glass in the toilet window. We're not really sure. We really can't imagine that it was built that way. So maybe this window was broken at some time and replaced by ordinary glass. But it does seem strange that the window on the toilet. And the museum, well, like any museum, I've got to put this in at the end. If you want to help our museum, we're happy to be publicised, talk about us. We're happy for you to come and visit if we get to the point where we can open, and we're working on that kind of thing right now. We always look for volunteers, we always look for donations, and membership is a pretty good deal in that you can come anytime you like and get a free ride on a trolley at the museum. So later we'll be celebrating 75 years. Do come and see us at some point. I'll spare you the whole music. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Tom, this is Steve. I've got a question. Are you there? You listening?
I'm not sure what's happened, but I'm not hearing anybody.
No?
Huh. Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you, yeah.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I'm trying to get a question to Tom. Tom, this is Steve. Can you hear me? Oh,
Apparently you have this sound turned off.
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
All right, let's try again. Tom, this is Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
All right, that's good. Like we noted, this is a learning experience.
It is.
I thought your presentation was great. I've always had a personal interest in trolleys, and especially the trolleys at Pittsburgh, where I lived a number of years ago. But I do have a question for you about the Shoreline Museum. I know that the description and some of the maps, I think, show the location of the old quarry that was there along the line. And what can you tell us about that? Did rocks, whatever they had there, did they get quarried out, put on the trolley line, or there was some hint of a little steam line connection, or just what's going on? Can you tell us?
Yes, the quarry was started around about the middle of the 19th century, 1850, 1860, somewhere about there. So when the trolley line came along in 1900, the quarry was there first. And the quarry had a little quarry line running from the quarry down to the Farm River. The Farm River is the boundary between East Haven and Brantford. And our visitor centre is in East Haven, but on the line you immediately cross the Farm River and you're into Brantford. We are the Brantford Electric Railway Association. So when the line came, it had to go up and build a little bridge over the quarry line and continue down to Short Beach and through Brantford. The quarry had various owners, but its claim to fame, it produced trap rock. There's a ridge that runs up the spine of Connecticut, as you were, and this is the southern tip of it, and they mined trap rock, and the line took it down to the river where there was a huge crushing plant. And the crushed rock was then put into barges and towed out into Long Island Sound and taken to various markets. The most famous market was an island in the Hudson River that needed to be expanded. It's an island that's shared between New York and New Jersey, and it needed to be expanded because the French had given the USA a gift, and they needed a firm base on which to put it. So rock from that quarry went to create Bedloe Island. Above the rock is a much more solid base. We're talking about the Statue of Liberty, in case anybody hasn't grasped that one. The solid base is concrete, but it's faced with granite, and the granite face comes from the other end of Brantford, from quarries that are still operating and produce fault-free granite, huge chunks of it, so you can build obelisks and other massive structures of granite from that quarry. So Brantford has a very strong connection with the island, Bedloe Island, on which stands the Statue of Liberty. And
so it sounds like that was quite the major operation, much more than I had anticipated.
It's not a huge quarry, but it went out of operation in, I think, the 1920s.
Okay. And I know that some years ago you had raised up by some number of feet a lot of the storage areas, I guess, and the sheds at the museum. Has that all worked out well now? Of course, I guess we haven't had, I don't know if it was flooding or hurricane or whatever that caused a lot of damage, but now that everything is raised up, it works much better?
Yes, the first barn that was built at the museum was a Quonset hut. These were cheap to come by in the years after the war, and various other barns were built in the same sort of area on what had been meadow and salt marsh and so on. And the big hurricanes, not Katrina, Sandy and before that Irene, was it, flooded the area and damaged a number of the cars. Of course, the motors and everything are under the floor, so the motors are vulnerable. We embarked on a project to shave the top off a hill at the back of the property and put two new barns on the hill well above any flood, any storm surge that is likely to come. It's even above the 1938 hurricane flood level. And we can get most of the collection up into these barns or onto the track leading to them in the event of another hurricane. The ones that we would leave down below in the original barns are the ones that are immovable, or the ones that it doesn't really matter if they flood because there's nothing much left of them and we can simply flush the salt water. We can hose them down afterwards. But yes, we're much better protected against floods, or at least the collection is. most of our track, in fact, yeah, practically all of our track is still vulnerable to flooding. And that's a bit of a problem, not so much, it's mainly a problem of the ballast being washed away by the water than anything else. But also in the signal cables doesn't help either.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that's all going to work out well, because certainly there'll be more hurricanes like Sandy coming in the future. So sounds like you're prepared for that eventuality.
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say to the other attendees, if you haven't been down to the museum, it's absolutely worthwhile. It's a really nice ride, and the equipment that's there on display is very nicely displayed. So it's a great way to spend a couple of hours. I haven't been there in a number of years myself, but I remember it makes for a really nice day out. And while you're down there, there's plenty of seafood restaurants around the area, so it makes a really nice day trip when we all get back into day trips. Hopefully sometime soon.
Well, and thank you for saying that. We are obviously still closed, but if as a group you wanted to get together and come down, I'm sure we could arrange for you to see some of the cars that I've shown you. The Mineola is buried away in a barn at the moment being worked on, but we could arrange to get you in there as long as you bring boots or something, because it can be wet. We could show you some of the things that the public doesn't normally see. So there's a thought for the future. You know, come down as a group and we can lay on a special tour for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Any other
Tom?
questions for Tom?
Tom, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Ron Pilater. A number of years ago, we were going to try to have a meeting down at your facility. That did not happen. But I'm wondering, do you have a facility or building that can handle about 30 people under normal conditions, so that we would be able to have a meeting down there and then the tour?
Yes, our visitor center has enough space. 30 would be, I mean, it'll take 30, yes. There's not a huge amount of space, but we could get 30 into the visitor center. We have we have toilets there, we have our gift shop there, so we could handle 30 there. Or we could get you into the concert hut if you wanted to meet, down in the main part of the museum. But yes, we could handle that.
Okay, that's something we'll keep in mind for the future.
We also have, at the moment, actually, I should have thought of showing you this. We've just acquired, last year, we acquired a model trolley layout. And as far as we know, there's a number of cars with it. As far as we know, it's the biggest model trolley layout anywhere in the U.S. And it's a proper trolley layout with overhead power. And the little trolleys run along with overhead power. If you came and saw us at the Big E back in January, we usually have a smaller version of that on display. And that attracts attention because it's got the overhead power. The one we have down in the visitor center is huge, so being able to come down and see that, I should be able to. I'll send Jim some pictures of it, and you can get an idea of what's involved. That might give you a good reason to come down, if nothing else.
Okay,
Tom, are there pictures of the layout on the website?
What was the question about the website?
Are there pictures of the model layout on the website? On your website?
No, I don't think so. No.
All right. Maybe there should be.
There possibly should be. It's not working too well at the moment. It's been a struggle to get it running continuously, as we need to do if we're putting it on show. But it is there, and I can certainly send a little video clip, and I can which was taken when we had only a few trolleys on it, but we now have a much bigger collection of little models on it. So yes, I'll get some pictures and send them to Jim.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Alrighty, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it. That was a fantastic presentation. I actually learned a lot, and it was great listening in and seeing your presentation. So, your certificate, I'll get it to you in the mail shortly. Like I said, normally we would hand out in person. I would hand you a certificate of appreciation, but unfortunately, can't quite do that. So I will get it into the mail. So thank you again, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take my leave. I have to go along to the museum now and do another presentation to the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum later in another hour or so. So thank you very much, and hope to see you down there sometime.
Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So let's take a quick 10-minute break before Jim starts. I have to restart my computer because it apparently just crashed on me. So bear with me if everyone gets booted off while I try to resolve this. Hopefully it doesn't affect anybody, but yeah, just beware, you might get booted off, and if that's the case, it's because I am resetting the conference call software. Okay. Take a 10-minute break and then come back at 11, and then Jim will start with his presentation, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm back. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
And your screen is moving still. You're not frozen.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know what happened on my end. It was frozen, so. Alrighty. Take it away, Jim.
Okay, thank you, Kaylee. As most of you know, I'm Jim Klein, and today we're going to talk about operations using JMRI. JMRI has been around for quite a long time. I believe it got its debut was somewhere in year 2000 or so. And I created this clinic for those that are interested in the JMRI tool known as Operations Pro. It's also a look at how the Farmington Valley Railway Society, the club that I belong to, is implementing this tool for our fairly large layout. The layout's about 40 by 40 feet. But most of the members, myself included, were not familiar with JMRI and specifically operations. So this should be beneficial to those who might be interested in setting up JMRI for their operations, but are hesitant to embark on such a project. Before we begin, however, I will briefly describe the various tools that make up JMRI. JMRI is a suite of free computer programs available to you, downloaded off the internet. That these programs are compatible with most popular platforms or operating systems, and it's developed to interface with a model railroad. It was designed by programmers who are model railroaders for model railroaders. There's an extensive suite of modules, and while we're going to be covering Operations Pro just so that you have an understanding of what else is under the hood with the JMRI suite, I'll just spend a couple minutes and go over what each one of them does. This one Kaylee knows very well. This is Decoder Pro, and it's probably the first module that most people get involved with when they deal with a JMRI for the first time, because it does give you a very convenient way to read and write CVs to locomotives. And what makes it nice is that rather than doing CVs, programming CVs one CV at a time, you actually have a graphical user interface that allows you to see what you're doing and what impact it's going to have. I have the speed table here as one of the tabs in Decoder Pro, and you can set these things for all sorts of wonderful, magical things, but we're not going to spend any time really getting involved with Decoder Pro or any of the other ones. This is about Operations Pro. The other one, the next one is Sound Pro, and I haven't dealt at all with this, so what I'm telling you now is basically what I've gotten off the help files, but essentially what this is similar to the sound that you can have that your engine would give with a sound decoder in it, but it's not in the engine or the locomotive itself. So you import files, you set up certain things, and it works in relationship to your throttle to produce the bells, the whistles, the engine idle, the things of those sort. This one, Panel Pro, is probably the one that everybody thinks about when they think about JMRI and automated interfacing. It actually allows you to construct a centralized train controlled style panel. And with it, you have the ability to point and click and change turnouts, see how the schematic of the railroad is for occupancy. You can see all the various functions going on in real time that your railroad is working under. So this one is very unique. But I will tell you this: it does require a little bit of effort to put this together, and there are some tutorials in the help file for JMRI that allow you to or show you how to go along and put all this together. It's a layered type programming language, so it takes a little bit of work to put all this together. But you can customize it to your railroad. That's the neat thing. Next thing up is Dispatcher Pro, and this ties into what we're going to be talking about with Operations Pro, in that it will give you a real-time indication if you have occupancy detectors set up for the various portions of your railroad. You'll be able to actually see in real time what is happening with your railroad right there on your computer screen. And then last is Logix. This is a programming language within JMRI that allows you to do certain things like switch a turnout, activate a signal on a mast, things of that sort. So, Operations Pro. This is what the clinic is going to be about today. And what it is, in essence, is a computerized database that contains all the information that you need to run successful operations for your model railroad. You can set it up as a standalone system. You don't have to connect it to your railroad if you don't want to. Or if you want to connect into your DCC system, you can certainly do that. To set up Operations Pro, regardless of which way you're going to utilize it, whether it's standalone or whether you're actually going to connect to your layout, you should understand that it's going to require a little bit of effort on your part in terms of data entry, because all the aspects of your railroad are going to be distilled down and placed into the database that Operations Pro operates from. And if you're going to use it for more than just inventory control, some people just use the aspect that because you're going to be identifying all your rolling stock and all your locomotives, that it actually serves as a very, very nice database because it gives all the attributes. You have to load in all the attributes of the individual cars and locomotives. But if you're going to use it beyond that and actually use it for operations, then it's best to follow the recommended sequence that Operation Pro has set up for you, and that's essentially starting with settings, work your way all the way through until you get to the trains portion, where it starts getting fun. So, the easiest form in Operations Pro to set up is the settings form, and essentially you do it one time and you set it and basically forget it. Now, I know a lot of clinics will take time and show you, going out to the web, pull down JMRI from GitHub or wherever you're getting it from, excuse me, and go through that whole process. This clinic is assuming you've already done that. You can go out and get programs, bring them into your computer or your iPad, whatever. So we're not going to cover how to do that. This is assuming you've already done that. So when you first get the settings screen, you're going to give your railroad a name. You're going to set up a name, and then you're going to determine what its travel direction happens to be. In this case, I have both checkboxes checked, north, south, east, and west. Very important. You want to determine or tell JMRI what your scale is, because JMRI is going to use this to determine track lengths, car lengths, things of that sort. Very, very important. And right out of the box, here we have a limit on your maximum train length. JMRI can, using that information, can determine when you're building trains that are too long, that exceed, for instance, here the 500-foot limit, etc. Maximum locos that you're going to have on a train, the horsepower per ton, that comes into play because when you're looking at grades, you can have a situation between stations where you have a grade. Maybe on the flat, your locomotive that you have lashed into your cut is fine, but when you start pulling a grade, it's not going to be able to handle because it just has too much tonnage it's trying to pull. And JMRI can say at that particular station, I'm going to throw in a helper locomotive to help you up and over the hump. The next two are things that you're going to arbitrarily decide. We're still working on these at the Farmington Valley Railway Society, and essentially what the switch time is, that is the amount of time it takes you to switch out or pick up a car on average. And the travel time is the travel time between stations, and obviously 4 minutes. That's really fast. Next up is how you want to describe your rolling stock. Do you want to use descriptive, flat cars, box cars, cattle cars, hoppers, whatever, or do you want to use AAR codes? You have those two choices. The unit of length, meters or feet, and optionally you also have the year model. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get further down, because someone like Chris Adams would love this. Next, when you first download JMRI, set it up on your computer, this tab here called Operations that you see on this form isn't there until you check off this box. So once you do the first setup, you check off this box, and then that Operations tab will be there for you. I don't like to have my programs closed down just when I save them, because I just wind up going back and restarting them. So I leave that box unchecked, and then you have the auto-save, auto-backup feature as well. When everything is to your liking, you go ahead and click on Save. Now, there's still some more stuff here in this form, and that has to do with Panel Pro, how you're going to set up the colors of your train icons on Panel Pro and things of that sort. But we're not covering any of that today, so just know that this section of the form, you will identify those things that you need for Panel Pro. So, as I said, I got started in JMRI largely because our club, the Farmington Valley Railway Society, wanted to start conducting operating sessions again. In the past, the club has been around since about the late 70s, early 80s, and there have been several attempts at doing operations through that period of time, but it always sort of fell off. It never quite gelled. So after I joined in 2014, we had talked about this quite a bit, and then when I found out that you had this great program in JMRI, me being a little bit of a geek, wanted to get involved in it. So what we did was this year we just started a website and a newsletter and all that stuff in February. And I included in the website a drop-down box called Op Sessions, so that all of the documentation associated with Op Sessions would be centrally available to our membership. And all they had to do was just click on the website, go into the tab, and pull down the PDF documents, because you can convert everything over to PDF very conveniently. It's nice and safe for people. They don't have to worry about spreadsheets and that sort of thing possibly infecting them. So the very, very first thing, the first document that we pulled down is a listing or a map of the layout itself. And very quickly, we have two sections to our layout. We're at a museum as well. And this section here is what the public sees. This area back here is our freelanced area. The front section is of the Collinsville Company, circa 1900, 1903, somewhere in that neighborhood. We have a very nice long main line that runs all the way down through here, does a reverse loop, and comes back out on the same main line. The patrons, or the people that come in to see the museum, there are several buttons, 3 buttons on the front of the fascia that allow them to operate 3 different trains for that period. The nice thing of it is you can see that we've got a connection here under the table that comes out here onto that main line. That main line is over 60-some feet, 70 feet long, something like that. And we can convert that over to DCC. This system here is all DC. I set up a computerized microcontroller system. I programmed it in, designed it, whatever, so that we would have a DC system that would just operate off of push buttons, because the museum personnel don't want to have to fire up computers and things like that when they do the tours. The club members are not always at the museum when the museum is open, so sometimes people come up and they could do a self-directed push button activation of the trains. So anyway, this is the map, and this is the first thing that I realized that I had to do in order to set up locations. And why are locations important? Well, they're the single most important part of the operations pro, because everything flows from there, and you need to describe what a location is. And a location does not necessarily have to have track. It can be a 60-degree crossover. Don't have any track assigned to it. But it turns out that as you build your routes and your trains later on, which is the whole goal for operations, is that you have places that can be indicated on the paperwork that you give your train crews. So this is the section of the freelance layout. We have an 8-track stub-ended yard here. Here we have 4 passenger tracks coming into midfield. This is midfield station, midfield yard. And then we have an engine service facility over here with turntable. So if we look at the very, very first page, you're going to pull down locations. You're going to add a brand new location. You set up, you put a name to it. This is another thing. Your naming conventions are something that you have to decide on early on before you get to this step, because there's nothing worse than filling out a form and then fighting with yourself as to what you want to name something. So you want to have all that taken care of up front. These names are going to appear on your switch list, switch manifest, things of that sort. And you're going to repeat the same operation in terms of determining what directions that particular yard will service, the type of rolling stock and locomotives. You can, if they're not checked, it's not going to be serviced by this yard. GMRI will not let this yard service that particular piece of rolling stock or locomotive, so it's not going to place it there. Then you move down to a description of the yard itself with all of the tracks, and you have 4 selections for the different types of tracks. You have spurs, yards, classification, interchange, and staging. Very quickly, a spur is something that you would find in an industry, and the distinction for a spur versus a yard is that when you set out or pick up, actually when you set out a freight car to that spur, or to that spur, its load will change. That's another thing that JMRI has a feature built in that you can have loads empty or loaded, and you can get even more details into it as far as having custom loads. So as soon as you drop a car at a spur, its load will change. If it comes in full, as soon as you drop it, set it out, it's going to be empty, and vice versa. There is another thing that you can do, we're not going to talk about today, but you have a scheduling feature that you can determine a time for when that load changes at that particular industry, which makes things even more interesting. A yard is a place to park cars, obviously, but their loads don't change. Classification, this is all per JMRI now. Classification interchange yards, they serve the function of, let's say you're going to have a train with a long cut of cars, and it's going to take part of them and drop them off on an interchange track somewhere. One of the rules of JMRI that you can set up is that train on its way back, if it's a turn, can't service that cut of cars. It's got to be done by a different train. Or you can have it set up that one road drops that cut off, but has to be picked up by a different road. So that's the kind of a nice little enhancement for this particular classification of track. And the last one is staging only, and the rules that apply with staging is that you make up an entire train. Wherever that staging track is, that train enters or leaves completely whole. You can't break into it and take cars out or add cars to it. When everything's done, you go ahead and save the location and continue building the rest of your locations. This is what an individual yard track form looks like as you add yard tracks to a location. Again, it's the same type of thing in terms of the format of the form. One of the things that I think I'm going to suggest to the developers that put JMRI together is that because all these forms essentially look the same, it becomes very confusing. You're not sure which form you're looking at. It would be nice to have a different color background or something like that so you could differentiate. I'm going to make that proposal to them, but that's just me. I get kind of crazy about this stuff. Same thing. We have a convention for naming where we decided that we're going to name tracks firstly by number. And we did that so that the rule then becomes when you're standing at a yard as an operator with your throttle in your hand, the track that's closest to the fascia is number 1, and then they progress sequentially, numerically, from there back to the wall. And that way you know that the first track is number 1 track, and it goes from there. The other reason I did it is that when I first set it up, we started using names like this one here is Langenheim Notch, or Langenheim Notch. Depending on how big the word is, or the name, I should say, it may or may not show up in its entirety on a switch form or a switch list or a manifest. So I decided to go ahead and put the track number in front of it. That forces the database to list all of the tracks in numerical order, plus it's an easy identifier. This is a shot of another yard that we have. We call it New City Yard, and you'll see that we have these posts that are numbered, T1, T2, T3, etc. Those are actually unused teeth cleaners or tooth cleaners, whatever. So they're very, very inexpensive. You can get like 150 of them for like $3. If you have a label maker and like a 16th inch drill, you can drill a nice little hole into the layout and put these posts right there to identify your tracks. The other thing they do is we've placed these these track markers at the foul points in the yard. So that way people will know when they come in you can't set a car beyond these points. So that works out very well in terms of people doing actual operations. And this is a list of all of the locations that are on the freelance layout and a couple that we identified for the Collinsville circa 1900, because we do interchange, if you will, between our freelance and that particular layout. But everything is there. Now, as you go down the list here and look at it, you see that you have an identifier for the parent name of the location, what type of tracks it has. You know, down here we have New City passenger car service, its spurs and yards. It also gives you the total length. Now, the neat thing about JMRI, the way they have it set up, is that when you're going along and you're identifying your tracks, yards, spurs, etc., you can take an actual physical measurement, get your Stanley rule out, and go from the stub end to the foul point and measure that length in actual inches, and then plug it into the form. We're getting some feedback here. All right. So GMRI will calculate the scale length in feet based on the inch measurement that you placed in. All you have to do is put the single the single quotes in, and it'll automatically do the calculation for you. This form also shows you how many feet of track are used, any rolling stock that happens to be on it, what the condition or what the status is, whether to be picked up or set out. And then this button here, when you're actually running operations, you can click on that button and identify that particular location as to what work needs to be done by the yard. That's why it's called Yard Master. So,
hey Jim,
next,
quick question.
Yeah.
So this is all just pre-set up work, right? This we haven't done anything yet. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all this is. That's why I said in the beginning, you do spend a little bit of time doing this. So there's some effort involved.
Okay.
So next up
just all
is
in the beginning. Once it's all set up, it should be okay.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, as an aside, I put together a 3-ring binder. Of course, that's what we do, right? And I have all the different sections, and then we would have these various virtual meetings. And it's one thing if it's your layout, you get to decide. I mean, it's great to be king or queen, whatever, and you get to decide what things are going to be named, how things are going to be named, etc. But when you have more than one person involved, then all of a sudden it becomes a committee. So, and another reason why I had the op sessions documentation put on the website, so we could go back and forth and make some decisions based on what we had already accomplished and what have you. So next up is rolling stock, and another shot of a different peninsula that we have on our layout. And the rolling stock this gets into the complete list. This is a complete inventory list. The one thing that JMRI doesn't do for you, it doesn't have a location for you to put in cost, which would be nice too. If you're going to use it for an inventory of your rolling stock and locomotives and things like that, it'd be nice to have some dialog boxes or some input boxes where you can put in there how much you paid for it, maybe when you bought it, where you got it from, things of that sort. That would go a long way to helping for that too. But when you look at this, you can see that I have this organized by road number in ascending order on the way down. You have the road name. You also have the type of car that it is, its length, what the status of the loads are. In this particular case, I have a Colonel. These are 3 Pullman troop sleepers that I had, 1940s era, that I wanted to have pulled as one pickup. That's a neat little thing that JMR allows you to do. If you've got, let's say you've got a bunch of ore cars that you've got 10 or 12 of them. They're all basically the same road, just different road number. You can set it up as a Colonel and list all 12 of them, with the lead being this asterisk, as you see here, and then that constitutes one set out or one pickup, even though you have 12 cars. The location is its current location, and as you can see now it might be a little bit more clear as to why I said I wanted to have the numbers first. And I see this is an old version here. I have track 1. That's not supposed to be there. This is an older form that I didn't screenshot very well. And it also shows you where it's going to go and the train that's going to get it there. The last thing up is the moves, and that shows all the moves that have accumulated via JMRI as you've gone along and run operations and things like that. And what JMRI does is look at the activity of a particular car. And if a car is kind of wanting in terms of moves, JMRI and its algorithm is going to say, okay, this car hasn't been used very much, so we're going to put that into the mix when we go to set up the next train build. In basic form, this is the form that you use, and you use this for every car. Now, in the case where we had the 12 ore cars, for instance, once everything's set up, and the only thing that really changes with that would be the number, you can just click on Save, click Add Car, go up here and change the number, and just keep repeating the process. That'll move it along fairly nicely. But if the cars are different, if you're going from a coal car to a flat car, you're just going to have to go and set everything up, fill everything out on the form, and save it that way. So there are some advantages to doing it where you can group similar cars together. You can get a little speed and efficiency of operation that way. The next up is locomotives. And it's identical in concept to what you do with, or how you set up your rolling stock. The form's basically the same, except in this case, it's locomotives. And you have the road number, the road name. Here you actually see the model of the type of locomotive that is, its length, whether or not it's part of a consist. You can same rule applies, similar to the Colonel. You can run this F7 with its dummy and have it as one unit. Again, its location currently in the yard, its destination, and what train it's associated with. And excuse me, you also have the ability to edit any form. Whenever you see edit, it's there for you to change if you wish. And again, the form is very, very similar to what you have for rolling stock. Now, I glossed over something, and that is the year built. Both on rolling stock and locomotives, you have the ability to put in the year or month, year. It's a 4-digit deal, 1953 or 12/5 '53, maybe it was built in December of '53. And what this does for you, as you're, and we're quickly getting there, as we're getting to the point where we're going to put together a manifest of trains, you can tell JMRI, I only want cars and locomotives built before this date, or built after this date, or you can put a range of dates in. So if you want to be very, very fine-tuned in terms of what you have operating on your layout, by putting in these built dates for each piece of rolling stock and locomotives, you can have a prototypically accurate representation for a particular year, range of years, etc. Okay, so we've got locations in, we've got our rolling stock in, we have our locomotives set up, and now we need to put together our routes. Our routes are a collection of stops along the way in a given pattern, and we're working on making ours an Amtrak size layout, but I don't think the museum is going to give us any more space, but we can certainly try. So again, same type of form. You're going to actually name a route the same way you named the location, and when you open it up, you will determine where you're going to start, where it's going to end up, and all the points in between. Now, this one happens to be a through freight from Midfield to New City, and if we go back, and I won't run us back there, but if we go back to the original map of the freelance layout, that started out being a point-to-point, with Midfield being on the western end and New City being at the extreme eastern end. So this is just a simple little route set up with 6 cars that is going to go or travel from Midfield Yard and drop that off and set them out at New City. So if you look at the starting point here at Midfield Yard, you identify the train's direction and how many moves it's going to make. Well, in this particular case, I said we're going to have 6 cars, so we've got 5 cars in a caboose, and so that constitutes 6 moves, and we're going to make certain that they're all pickups. So we designate pickups as what we want for this particular starting point, and then we're going to plug in a time for its departure, the maximum length, and we've been keeping the maximum length at 500 feet for now. We're still experimenting on a small basis for shorter trains, so we get an understanding of how this really works and all the nuances, because there's a couple things that happen that gets confusing, and the more information you put into JMRI, or the larger you make things, the more complicated the problem becomes. And take notice that you also have a grade input here, and this is where JMRI can determine whether or not you're going to need a helper to get up and over that grade. The X and Y components deal with Panel Pro, because you're going to have an icon for a colored icon for the trains traveling east, west, north, south, what have you, and this is the coordinates for that that icon. As you get more and more stops for a particular route, maybe you got them out of order, or for some reason you want to change. So here you have the ability to run this particular row up or down. Now there's only 2 here, so that makes it kind of difficult. But if you, let's say you had 6 or 7 entries and you wanted to change up the order, you could do that as well. Maybe you made a mistake entering this information, or maybe you just want to make things really, really unique for your train crew. This form shows a passenger local, and we called it the Midfield Local, and it runs from New City and terminates in Midfield Passenger, at the passenger station. So We start out in New City. The direction is all west. Again, we only have 3 cars that we're picking up. In this particular case, it's not a freight, it's a passenger. So we've got 3 passenger cars that we're picking up. It's going to leave New City at 1900 hours, 7 o'clock, and you can, that's something else I failed to mention. You can set it up for 12-hour, 24-hour time. It's up to you. And again, if you look down through here, you can see that we have a couple of places where we have 2.5% grades. So these are all a listing of all the stops that we're going to make along the way until we finally terminate at Midfield Station. So we have all of our routes set up, and now it's time to assign a train to it, to those various routes. So here is again, forms look identical. They start getting confusing after a while. You really have to watch. And you have this wee little descriptor up here for trains. But in this particular case, this is where you actually go along after you have your train actually set up. Once everything's done, you can click the build button here, and it's going to pick the various pieces of rolling stock for that train. As you can see, the first one here, the Midfield Local, is currently at New City Station. It terminates in Midfield Station, and it has a 3-car build. They're built successfully. The rest of these have been terminated back in May 21st. And this is what, if you open the Midfield Local, if you open that up to take a look at it, this gives you all the information on the Midfield Local. It starts out at New City Station. Here's all the stops it makes in between, and here's where it terminates. The listing of the cars that you have approved for for this particular train, and down here is a check-off box for all the different locomotives that you say you have no problem servicing that train. You can limit this. Maybe you just want to have diesel, and that would eliminate all the steam selections down here. But for us to keep things easy or easier, we decided to just go ahead and not make too many limitations on JMRI when it makes its selections, so we can get a feel for how this all works. The train requirements here, some people, when I read the various things that were available in the tutorials and the help files in JMRI, it appears as though a lot of people don't want to assign locomotives to a particular train. You have the ability to just deselect having locos on there by making it 0. There's a 0 in here, and then you just go ahead as you know, you're running the layout, or you know, whoever the club member is that's running the layout, that particular train, you just pick whatever engine that you want. Then you also have this here. This is a passenger train. It's not a freight, so I could say I want to have a caboose and maybe identify the road that I want that caboose part of, or maybe I have a Fred instead of a caboose. So once everything's done, you click on Save Train, and the train becomes saved, and then you will be able to go back. I'm going back now, and click the Build button here, and have JMRI actually build the train for you. So once the train's built, it's now time to generate the paperwork for the train crews. And what you do is you bring up the in the print preview section in your trains, you can print off the manifest or the switch list. And this is an example of the manifest for the passenger train we just looked at. And as you can see, you've got an RS2 that's going to run this thing. We've got 3 cars. One of them happens to be a baggage car. It's in the pickup column. It shows all that's going on in between the departure station and the terminus. And then down here, when you finally get to where you're going, Midfield Station, it shows you what gets set out and where it gets set out. The other piece of paperwork is the switch list for the yard master. If you've got someone doing switching operations in your yard, then you have this piece of paperwork as well. And let me stop here. All this is on the computer, but you also have it uses a notepad style Word doc, if you will, and these will print off in either 8.5 by 11 format, or if you decide to print 2 to a page, they will fold up very nicely for the smaller clipboards that most people use for operations to put their paperwork on, and you can actually get 4 pages worth, if you will, of instructions for your switch list for the people running, the train crew running the yard. And for a passenger like this, there's not a lot going on. But if you've got a yard that's servicing several trains, that switch list could be, fairly extensive. So that works out really, really nice. And I'd be remiss if now I know this is an iPhone 4. It's just a very, very good photo. But you do have the ability, if you're a club like us, we seem to have a DOA throttle every couple of months. And if we're going to be running operations, you need a Wi-Fi network hooked to your computer, interface to your DCC command center, and you pull this app up on your phone, your smartphone. It works. There's one for Android as well, or iPad, and individuals have their own smartphone throttle that they can use to run trains. This is a free version. This app does not cost any money. It's only a single throttle. If you want to pay, I don't know what it's very, very minimal for Y Throttle Lite, I think it's called, is you can get a dual.
I think it's $5, Jim.
Pardon me?
I think it's $5.
Is it $5? Yeah, I knew it wasn't much.
For
It's
Apple.
like, yeah, well, I'm cheap, so. So anyway, you do have that capability. And one of the things as a club that we're thinking about doing, just like everywhere else, we have a membership problem. And our members are starting to dwindle in terms of, quantity. And we're looking to open up for, Boy Scouts, whatever, Girl Scouts, to have a night every 2, 3, 4 months where we have an open house. And, I don't think there's any 10 or 11-year-old that doesn't have a smartphone. So if it's a free app, they're there, right? So we can bring them in. They can have their own throttle on their phone. We can change the password to our Wi-Fi network after we're done, so that they don't come back in and try and pull something funny. But it's there. The other thing is, and this might appeal to what's wrong with my pointer? My pointer just died. There we go. In addition, this is not made by JMRI, but it is linked in the software to go out to this website called Train Crew. And if you really want to get down and just have a ton of things for the crew to do, for instance, I have the switching pane up here. What this does, you click on this, and you're going to wait 5 seconds while you listen to some audio of hoses being coupled and uncoupled. And depending on what you want your crew to do for each car set out pickup, you can really drive them crazy. So this is available too, but it's not made by JMRI. It's just something that they interconnected with in JMRI. So finally, I would, if this has piqued your interest in JMRI, it was a very quick run through. I realize that, but it basically lays out the shell for what it is that you need to create operations for your layout. And as you saw, most of these photographs are from the Farmington Valley Railway Society from our freelance layout. And the only thing I would say is, lastly, is I have one final request. I know Kaylee touched on it earlier, but we really, really need people to step up and deliver clinics and whatever. And if you have any hesitation about doing it at all, and you don't think that you would have enough to say or whatever, everybody has their own special skills, and it's really not that difficult to do this. I know it seems for the first time it might be a little bit of a daunting task, but I would bet you that if I asked you to tell me all about the very first car you bought, you could spend more than an hour doing it. The same way with your firstborn, or whatever. I could go down a whole list of normal things, and you could find a ton of things to talk about or to use up a ton of time. So it's really not that difficult. And if you've got a skill, everybody has special skills. If you have a skill in this hobby, for instance, we'd love to hear it. So please, do us all a favor. We'd love to hear what you have to say. So, and of course, it all applies to the AP program too. So if you're interested in MMR, well, here's one of the ways to do it, through volunteer. And with that, let me see, make sure. That's it.
Unmuted.
Am I muted? Okay, let me.
Thank you, Jim.
Uh-oh.
Very much appreciated.
You're welcome.
I lost my computer about a month ago, my hard drive, and I was foolish enough not to have everything saved on the cloud. And I've been starting on Dick Joyce's Ingleside and Oakdale, documenting all the cars, about 800 of them on the layout.
Oh God!
And I've lost all that on the magnetic side, but I have hard copy of what I had done. And obviously, I'm going to go to JMRI to continue entering the rest of the layout, and then progress, because operations is my interest. So that's great.
Okay. Yeah. Well, again, I'm certainly no expert. But this is the trial and error that I found in terms of getting FVRS set up, and it absolutely, the very first steps, it was just very, very daunting, because it when you finally distill it down, it's a database, end of story. But it takes a lot of work to put all the data in. Once you have it in, it works out very well. And I've got a problem here. My screen is frozen.
I see I'm unmuted again. Somebody's been pressing the mute, unmute button back and forth. Not sure who, but apparently we all have access to it from what I can see.
You should have one for individually.
No, that's sorry, John. That's me playing around.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out where that. All right, I finally got into my system tray for FCC.
If you're interested in some, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Andrew.
If you're interested in some further reading on operations, we got 19 East Copy 3, which is about timetable and train order. And OPSIG also put out this book, the Operations Compendium. And if you go to opsigtickets.org, Yeah, opseg.org. You don't have to join to use all their stuff. They do have some free. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback.
John, I'm going to mute you for a second because we're getting feedback. All right, go for it.
They have on opseg.org. They have a bunch of resources and links on their page. There's an industry database of just broken up by state or by region. So just every industry in the world in the U.S. that they've compiled. Then they have a list of books and just all different types of things on operations for model railroads. Where you can go to find more information. To get like a neat bibliography, I guess, of books and frequently asked questions. There's a lot of different things. If you guys are really interested in operations, OPSIG is a great place to go find more information.
Right, and the optics is part of the NMRA, so it's a specialty branch that's focused more on operations, and it's a great group. I know they do regular op sessions as well. Obviously, with what's going on in the world, it's currently on pause, but definitely worthwhile checking out if you're interested in operations. Any other questions for Jim?
Yeah, this is Steve. Jim, I got a question for you. Or maybe it's more of a comment.
Okay.
It seems to me that this operations program is pretty worthwhile, but don't you think it advisable, due to the complexity, to start with something really small, like even if you have to dummy it up, put in a simple layout, a couple loops of track, a couple alternative destinations, 2 locomotives, 25 cars, and just put it all in there, and then, when it's all done, push run and let's see what comes out of it, rather than, go all the way to the extreme like you did for the club. I understand why you had to do that, but it seems like if you go in too fast, you might really get completely bogged down and not know even how to back out of it to figure out where you're at. So that was just an observation of mine, to start with something really simple, even if you have to kind of invent it, and see how all the pieces work.
Absolutely. That's as a matter of fact, that is exactly how we started. But one of the things that we're all guilty of is I want it all now. So I quickly realized that once we started into this thing, that it was best to do like you said, and that's where the new city of the midfield through freight and passenger local came from, because we essentially did an end-to-end run just to see how things would work, and we moved on from there. Once it fell on me, and I'm not patting myself on the back or anything like that, but I'm the one that came up with the idea. So okay, Jim, you go run with it, and so it was up to me to validate the fact that Operations Pro would actually work. So I did exactly what you suggested, and I neglected to mention that in the presentation. I'm going to change that so that people understand it. That this is more, what you're seeing now is more of an end product. This is what you can get to, and we're not even halfway close, because one of the neat things about Operations Pro is the scheduling. There's a whole other dimension to the scheduling, because we're looking at, for the club, maybe 7-8 train crews, and we have a single main line for most of our layout. There's only dual main lines in certain high traffic areas. For the rest of the time, it's single, with passing sidings in most places. So yes, it complicates it, but you're absolutely 100% correct. I agree.
Yeah. Now, when you put this thing all together for the first time and you started getting some outputs, what kind of error messages did you get, and you had to go back and redo things? I mean, was it intuitive to find the mistakes and where you had made misconnections and things like that? Go back and fix it and get it running.
Actually, when you do your build, where you start seeing mistakes is when you start actually building your trains. You already have your routes in, you know, what it's going to drop off, pick up, various industries, etc., where it terminates, where it departs, that sort of thing. You assign a train to it. You say, okay, let's push the button and have it build. That's when you're going to find things popping up that says you want to assign this to a particular track, but that track is not accepting the type of car that you want to place here. The rolling stock might be a hazardous piece of freight that you're going to try and put on a track that you designated as non-hazardous, as for instance. So you're going to get all sorts of error messages. But the nice thing with JMRI is you get a build list error report. It's a little cryptic in how it's written, but once you play with JMRI for a little bit, then you'll be able to read the build list. It comes after you do one or two crash and burns. Once you start delving into it, then it starts making a little bit more sense, and you actually get the report. I would recommend, however, that you do it entirely on the screen. If all these reports can get printed out, you will go broke buying paper and ink if you decide to print all this stuff out. So try and do as much as you can on the computer. But I happen to be the type of guy that loves to have paper in my hand, and so that's how I know about the ban or the loss of paper.
Unmuted.
Jim, I have a question for you. If I put these 800 cars into the layout or into JMRI, can I have someone else edit to actually, like I put where they are now? I don't know where they're going. Someone else could go in and then assign the destination for each car?
Actually, JMRI will put in the destination. You can leave everything open, or blank, I should say, for the its current location versus its destination. So you can just leave that. You don't have to add that at all. And then later on, as you populate, let's say you're going to populate your yard. You can say, okay, I've got this New Haven boxcar here, and I'm going to put it on track 3. Then you pull that up, and it's very easy to pull up. You can plug in for a find function, FIND. You can plug in the road number and ask the GMRI to search the roster, and it'll highlight that so you can immediately go in and edit it. And then you can place it on whatever track or location that you want.
What I've been doing is basically taking the cars where they are, going through the layout systematically on what's on there and operating, putting all the car information in and the location. But someone else is supposed to come along and set up the op session on what train is it going to be part of, where's its ultimate destination. Although I suppose JMRI could then decide which train it should go in to get there, which would be even better.
Yes, and that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, our normal club night is Thursday night. There were half a dozen of us with masks on planning a robbery while we were over there. Never mind. So we've been doing a clean of all the industries, and I had my laptop with me, and we were placing cars in industry. And then as we were doing that, I was coming behind with my laptop, and I was pulling up that car and assigning it to that particular industry. So we have all of our industries populated. Then, after we're about halfway finished with that, we've got a lot of industries. So once we have all that finished, then I'll go back and I'll tell JMRI, okay, build this train, because it's already going to know what industries have cars parked at them, are already set out, and then it's going to do what it does in its algorithm. Now, the neat thing is, as you're setting up your route, from the point where you leave to the terminus and everything in between, you tell GMRI how many moves you want to have happen at that particular location. And if you say I want to have 3 moves, that could be 1 set out, 2 pickups. It could be 3 set outs, no pickups, and any combination there. All right? You decide. So when you have everything set up and you say, okay, flip the switch, let's go, GMRI will build it out, and then it'll have a randomness to it. That's the neat thing about it. You know, you're even though you have an industry on a route, for that particular build that you just executed, it may skip that and say, no, I'm not going to do anything at that industry right now. It's really neat in that aspect.
Yeah, that's kind of nice. That's the way
well, the other thing too is, yeah, exactly. For us, as we only have a 2-hour session Thursday nights. We're going to try and get the museum to let us stay there longer. But let's say that I had 7 or 8 routes set up and only 5 train crews showed up. But I've got all those builds finished. All the paperwork, the switch list, everything is done. So the train crews go out, they do all their work, 9 o'clock rolls around, and we still have like 2 or 3 trains left to run. I don't have to worry about it. I just leave things set the way they are, come back next Thursday, and pick up where we left off. Now, there's a caveat to that. There are a couple members who don't want to do operations, but they love putting trains together. So now we had to set up a rule where in that one, the midfield yard, we have one of the tracks. We're still arguing over which track it's going to be, but one of those tracks is a freelance track. Rolling stock can get put there, and you can run a train, come in Thursday night, you can run a train, but you cannot touch anything along the way in terms of industry. You can't switch out cars or whatever, but you bring that train back and set it back in that freelance track, and everybody's happy, hopefully.
Plan at least, right?
I'm sorry, Kayla, did you? Kayla, did you ask a question?
No, I was just saying that's the hope at least, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the other
Any
thing
other
too,
questions?
I was just going to say that the freelance layout is very easy to get to by anyone coming into the museum. There's a swing gate there. They just unlock a deadbolt. They can come back there, and it's amazing the kids that just love to push cars around on the layout. And sometimes we find things not missing, but out of place. They're not where we left them, that sort of thing. So if for us to do operations, even though we start at 7 o'clock, we're going to have to get there early, whoever is in charge of setting up for operations, and make sure and verify that all cars are where they're supposed to be in order for us to be able to conduct a session without people screaming at us for not finding cars.
Any other questions? Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jim, for presenting this. This was a great topic. I think it was a great crash course, great intro to operations. I'm sure John Randall, I'll be seeing some examples in progress and when next time we meet up at Dick's place. So looking forward to seeing that. That's pretty much all I have for the meeting.
Actually, I'd like to have operating sessions online at that layout once we get it done.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. There's a goal. There you go, John. All right. So today we actually have a NMRA X event running concurrent at this time. So if you're looking forward to seeing more train content, I would highly suggest hopping over to the NMRA YouTube page or NMRA Facebook page. Our very own Andrew is going to be presenting at 2 p.m. You want to give us a quick rundown of what your presentation's about?
Sure. I'm going to be giving a presentation on layout command control, and specifically it'll be just operating a turnout. this turnout that's on the scrap piece of plywood with this push button. I'm going to do a live configuration of an LCC node. So I have a spare node here that I'm going to just swap over the connections from the one that's already set up, and I will set it up for you, and it'll take about 5 minutes to do that part. But we'll go through and talk about the basics of LCC, what it is, what it does not do at this point, and some of the, the open-ended, you can do other things with this other than what I'm saying. This board that I'm showing you here has, if you think about in terms of possibilities, this has 16 input and output lines, and they can be either or, either an input or an output, and you can choose. You get to choose what that does. So it's basically, you're controlling some other device with this board. It's a 5-volt signal. It's either on or off, and so if you think about it from that standpoint of where all can you take that, it's a standard. So if you want to come along and roll your own LCC board, there's some books out there about how to program Arduinos to work with a controller area network, and there's a Yahoo users, well, it's not Yahoo's users group anymore. It's Groups.io for developers for LCC. It's called the OpenLCB Groups.io. If you're into programming, that's programming side. If you're not into programming, LCC is not programming. There is no programming to do with these. It's just drop-down boxes. So understanding some basic definitions of what terms mean and selecting the right drop-down box. It's no more difficult than using Decoder Pro to configure CVs. And in fact, it's easier because it's all written descriptions instead of CV numbers that you have to remember for each decoder. So we'll go into that.
Move your mic. Yep. Move your mic away from your face just a smidge.
Sorry. Yeah.
Perfect.
Good. Okay. Good. So we'll go into the basic configuring of a node, and we'll operate a turnout.
Andrew, you said that's 2 o'clock?
2 p.m. Yes, it's going to be on the NMRA. You can find it on the NMRA YouTube page, I believe. Kaylee said, and if you're not on Facebook, you can get to it. You don't have to be. Let me see here. It should be facebook.com/NMRA. I believe is the page, and you can actually access live Facebook feeds without a Facebook account. So you don't have to give them any of your information in order to utilize that.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, let me know if this is some format that people like. How was everybody's experience with this? I know this was a first-time trial, so there were some kinks and some bugs that we need to work out. But I'm thinking about doing this either more regularly or at least having this available. So like I said earlier, we can have members who we don't really get to see or who can't really leave their place be able to participate in future meetings.
This was great, I think. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for the presentation, and it worked very well. I've done a couple of the NMRA X stuff, and that works well as well. It would be nice to be able to get back together in person at some point when all of this pandemic crap is solved. But in the meantime, this is a great way to do it, and it might be a great sort of addendum to the in-person meetings once we're back to in-person. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Justice. I appreciate that.
Unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Both presentations.
Is it just me, or is the main screen black?
It is, yes.
Yeah, because we still have Jim as sharing his screen.
Just a quick correction, it's facebook.com/nmra.org. And you can just ignore the banner at the bottom of the screen and click directly on the live video.
Hang on, let me give you the presentation, right? If you're sharing screen, Andrew.
Oh, I'm not, but I can. Oh, I had to download something to be presenter. All right, sure.
All right.
That's fine.
Okay. So yeah,
No, I can
Facebook.com,
see
or the
somebody.
easiest I think is going to the easiest is to go to YouTube.com, go to do a search for NMRA and view it from their Facebook page. View it from their YouTube channel. They are presenting this live, and it's ongoing now. So, yeah, like I said, that's all I have for today. Thank you everyone for coming in. It was great to hear everybody's voices. It was great to see some of you on video. Hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person soon. And in the meantime, like I said, go over to NMRA and check out what's going on with NMRAF.
Before we leave, one quick thing, if I may.
Shoot. Yep.
Yep. We've got meetings scheduled for August, October, and December. I think it's 8/8, 10/10, and 12/12, which is kind of unique. My suggestion would be, because we don't know whether or not we're going to be able to go into the police community center, that we say, regardless, that date stays there. If it turns out that the community center says, no, we can't open this weekend, or you can't hold your meeting, that we just flip it over to a virtual meeting. That way the date stays the same. We'll have consistency for people who are out there that are expecting a meeting every 2 months. That's already set. So it's just a matter of changing the venue. It's either at the community center, or it's online virtually. End of story.
No reason you couldn't do both. If the community center is open, you could do the community center, but you could have the person who's doing the presentation be live, so that folks who can't make the community center or are not, too concerned about the current situation to go, could still participate.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is the plan. Too. Yep. Yeah. Both Jim and Justice, you hit the nail right on the head. That is the plan. The only thing I have to check in is with the Wi-Fi access at the community center at the police station. Simply because my phone plan doesn't permit to have that much data. So that's the only hiccup. I would have to look into what the Wi-Fi situation is at the community center. But yes, that is the intention. That is the plan. I do intend to have the next meeting, our August meeting, on the date we originally had scheduled, which I think you said was 8/8, right, Jim? Yeah, and then go from there. I know at one point we actually were supposed to, for the August meeting, we actually had planned to meet at the New England Railroad Museum, but unfortunately, obviously, with the current situation, I don't think that's going to be happening, so we will reschedule that for another time. But yeah, so that is the plan. Our next meeting is I target to have it on 8/8, or whatever the second Saturday is. And for now, let's plan on being in person, but we'll send out an email. Look forward to Ron's email, and then we'll be either a virtual session, or if you feel like venturing out, we'll be at the community center.
Sounds good.
Alrighty?
Just
awesome.
for reference, we are authorized to use the room at the moment, but because of the spacing requirements, there was not enough room to have our normal crowd. Plus, a number of people at this time are still not comfortable attending a meeting, so that's why we had to do the virtual.
Yeah.
Quick question. Does anybody know how to get the chat to work in pre-conference calls? I'm trying to drop links to the NMRA YouTube channel and the Facebook page.
There's a chat icon at the top of the screen.
Yeah.
You should just click it and it brings up the chat.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. I just dropped a link in there. Does anybody else see it?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so there. All right, so those are the two the Facebook page and the YouTube channel that I just dropped in there. I'll drop them in again.
Yep. Beautiful. They're there. Thank you.
They're there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's part 2 of the video. They reboot the video every so often. They start up a new link. Yeah, 6 hours or sometimes less, just to keep one, to keep the video links down, and to get the there's issues with Facebook, so Facebook kicks you off of Facebook Live after some length of time. So those are the links. Enjoy. Watch me crash and burn on this because
No, you'll be fine.
I didn't get my LCC thing. I tried last night to do something with it, and I didn't have any coffee, and I was very tired, and I screwed it up completely. And so this morning I got up before coffee and made it work. But we'll see. So my preparation for this clinic was minimal. We'll see how this goes.
Okay, now if you have it working, don't touch it until the clinic.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Unplugged.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to hit the record